Hey Guy! Today we will come together to explore the life of a famous painter. Vincent Willem van Gogh is a Dutch post-impressionist painter, regarded as one of the most famous and influential figures in the history of Western art. Let's immerse ourselves in the art of painting and the story behind his life. Listen to the entire story, and if you enjoy it, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. Night gently descended upon the village of Zundert in southern Holland, where a breeze from the sunflower fields carried the cool, moist air of late summer across the little wooden porch. Inside the quiet room, where candlelight flickered softly, Therese and Theodorus van Gogh awaited the birth of their sixth child. That night, on March 30th, 1853, the first cry of the baby boy Vincent Willem rang out, marking the beginning of a journey full of colour, yet fraught with turmoil that would forever change the course of Western art history. Vincent's parents were humble people. His father, Theodorus, was a devoted Protestant minister, and his mother, Therese, worked as a seamstress, her heart always brimming with steadfast love for her children. From his earliest days, Vincent was a shy, quiet child, yet his deep-set eyes seemed to hold an entire world of dreams. While other children ran and played among the glowing yellow fields of rapeseed, he preferred to sit quietly hidden behind a bush, watching flocks of birds against the grey sky and listening to the rustle of leaves, as if trying to capture every fleeting moment of nature. Vincent's childhood was also marked by high fevers that often left him bedridden on the little wooden bed, his small body trembling with chills. His mother gently soothed him with her warm lullabies, while his father carefully carried up the stairs the volumes of the Bible, hoping his son would grow strong and faithful. Yet as soon as his health recovered, he would rush off on solitary walks, carrying a small sketchbook and a few sticks of coloured chalk. The sight of wildflowers, dewdrops glistening on leaves, or busy bees gathering nectar, all were recorded in his earliest scribbled lines, as if he longed to preserve beauty forever. At the age of 4, Vincent was taken by his father for the first time to the church where his father preached. The soaring, vaulted ceilings, the cold stone columns, and the dim light filtering through stained glass windows were imprinted on his mind. By the flickering candlelight, the scenes from the biblical murals, the robed figures swept away by the flood, or kneeling in worship before the Lord, filled him with both awe and a trembling emotion. From that moment, Vincent's passion for form and light began to awaken, even though he did not yet understand that this was the seed that would guide the rest of his life. During his elementary school years, Vincent attended the Christian school in Zundert. His teachers remember the boy in an oversized uniform, his tousled blonde hair falling over his forehead, and his habit of sitting quietly in the back of the class. He rarely raised his hand to speak. Instead, Vincent watched his classmates' faces and would occasionally sketch a small drawing in the margins of his notebook. While the review exercises in history and mathematics did not trouble him, spelling drills and explanations of abstract concepts often left Vincent puzzled. His teachers, though fond of him, more than once gently suggested to his parents that Vincent should be encouraged to develop his distinctive talents. The Van Gogh household was always filled with the rustle of books and the echo of handwritten letters. Vincent's father often urged him to read the biographies of martyred saints, praising their perseverance and unshakable faith. His mother, by contrast, would lead him to the illustrated storybooks for children, where nature and humanity met in gentle harmony. On one rare occasion, Vincent was given a tiny box of watercolours and a large sheet of paper, and from that moment on, he became passionate about blending greens, apricot yellows, and earth browns, trying to recreate the canopy of leaves, the edge of grass, or the shadows of evening stretching across a winding path. The visits to relatives in Brabant, the neighbouring countryside, were an opportunity for Vincent to commune fully with nature. He and his brother Theo, who would later become his closest confidant, supporter, and true soulmate, walked together along the rutted lanes, pausing by the banks of clear still canals to watch flocks of wild ducks glide by. Often Vincent would sit motionless beneath a great tree, intently observing slow drifting clouds, then scratch his head and pull his sketchbook from his pocket to capture a few rapid strokes. Crude though they were, they already carried boundless passion. Those earliest memories were etched in Vincent's soul like silent paintings, waiting to burst forth once he truly took up the brush. Even though the years to come would be filled with inner turmoil, conflicts with his family, and a long, arduous search for his own identity, the seed of his art had already been planted, and in the nighttime breeze that stirred the fields, the swaying rapeseed blossoms seemed to welcome Vincent Willem Van Gogh into a vast world where, no matter how fierce the storm, art endures forever. Early the next morning in Zundert, with the night's mist still lingering in every leaf crevice, Vincent awoke for the first time with a clear awareness of his own life. The cosy room smelled faintly of oak wood and fresh linen, but in his mind that peaceful atmosphere suddenly blurred under the longing to explore more deeply. Clutching his sketchbook, still damp with chalk dust from the night before, Vincent quietly descended the wooden stairs, each creak sounding as if it revealed a message from his own soul. His parents had already left the house for the morning service, leaving in the simple kitchen a few slices of dark bread and a box of still warm milk. Vincent set his sketchbook and paint box on the little table by the window, where the dawn light filtered softly through the gauzy curtain. He smiled gently when he saw on the pristine paper the crude strokes from last night that outlined the curve of the wild daisy blossom outside the door. Without hesitation, he placed the pale yellow chalk on its tip and began shading with firmer lines, striving to capture the morning light dancing upon the petals. In that moment, he truly felt the simple joy of creation. Every movement of his hand seemed to connect directly with his heart, causing Vincent to lose track of time. Only when the sound of the bread thudding onto the table rang out did he startle. Oh, breakfast had gone cold. He hurriedly put away his paint box, wiped his hands and stepped outside, where the little vegetable garden was opening new, emerald green shoots. On the way to school, Vincent passed the wild mustard field that he and his brother often crossed each afternoon. Today he noticed a few differences. The blossoms swayed in the breeze, tracing orange-gold lines against the damp earth. He stopped, pulled a scrap of coarse paper from his pocket, and quickly sketched a few strokes. Awkward as they were, they carried a fierce yearning to capture the momentary transformation of nature. Arriving at school, Vincent keenly felt the pressure of the traditional learning environment. Monsieur Delan, the teacher, had just climbed onto the lectern, his voice sternly explaining division and fractions. While his classmates diligently took notes, Vincent let his gaze drift to the corner of his desk, where he hid a zinc-printed picture of a painting by a French artist, a gift he had discovered in an old magazine his father had kept from a business trip. The warm tones and soft lines of that painting stirred something in his mind he had never felt before. He silently told himself, "Perhaps my life need not revolve solely around numbers and letters." At midday in the little church, the voices of the hymns still echoed. Father Theodorus, clad in his solemn vestments, joined the congregation at the sanctuary in lifting up the apocalyptic chants. Vincent, seated at the back pew, felt each breath of music entwine with the gentle prayers. The sound reverberated through the silent space, causing his heart to tremble with every pulse, as though art and faith were meeting in the depths of his soul. Truly God had created a beautiful universe. But for Vincent, the human hand, through brush and palette, could also help exalt that life in its own way. That afternoon, after classes, Vincent and his brother Theo went together to visit their uncle's used bookshop in the nearby town. The shop was piled high with leather-bound volumes, each layer of dust marking the passage of time. Uncle Van Gogh, who doted on Vincent, greeted the brothers with a gentle smile, then led them to a low shelf where black and white prints by famous Dutch masters of the previous century were kept. Vincent eagerly flipped through every page, examining sketches of rural scenes, minor portraits and canal landscapes. His hands trembled each time he encountered the delicate strokes of Rembrandt or Vermeer, revealing the heights of understanding light and shadow. His uncle smiled knowingly and handed Vincent a slim book titled The Art of Light, urging him to take it home for study. On the way back, Vincent clutched the book tightly, each page pressing upon his mind with countless questions. What is light? How can colour evoke emotion? How might I use them to tell my own story? Once home, Vincent immediately shelved the book and ran upstairs to the corner of the little garden where white blossoms had opened. He draped a thin white cloth over a wicker chair, pulled out his box of watercolours, and gently sprinkled a few drops of water onto a petal. Following what he had learned from the art of light, he began to experiment, applying pale yellow at the petal's tip, fresh green at its base, and dabbing tiny white spots to suggest sunlight's reflection. After each blend, Vincent looked up at the sky turning sunset hues, striving to match his tones to the real scene outside his window. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. His brother Theo entered and laid a hand gently on Vincent's shoulder. "Your painting is beautiful. I've never seen wildflowers look so alive." Vincent looked up, suddenly warmed inside. "Do you really think so? I'm afraid I'm not good enough." "Not at all. Every stroke you make carries belief and keen observation. I'll tell you about Paris, the city of art, home to the Louvre and countless great painters. Once I finish my work in Arnhem, I'll take you there." Theo's promise planted a seed of adventurous longing in Vincent's heart. He gazed out the window at the night sky studded with distant stars and thought, "One day soon I will paint everything I have seen and felt, so the world will know my own voice." In that moment, the white blossom before him seemed to glow even more, radiating a soft light that bore witness to the youthful dream of this future painter. At 12 years old, Vincent Willem Van Gogh began to enter the transition between childhood and adolescence, as the skies over Zundert felt increasingly too narrow for his dreams. One early autumn morning in 1865, when dew still clung to the window's crevices, and the small patch of mustard greens beside the house lay under a sombre green hue, Vincent received a special letter. It was an invitation to work part-time at the office of Goupil Cie, a prestigious art dealership with a branch in The Hague, where his father had pinned hopes for a stable future for his sixth son. On his first day, dressed in simple yet tidy attire, Vincent followed a dedicated clerk down the bustling Voorstraat, where the shop displayed hundreds of prints, art books, and elaborately framed original paintings. As he stepped through the glass door, the scent of floor polish mingled with oil paint solvents in the air. He was assigned to inventory the prints, handling each sheet with care, comparing every line to the catalogue entries, then recording their dimensions, ink colour, and condition. What might have seemed a monotonous task captivated Vincent. He read each annotation closely, learned the names of renowned artists like Millet, d'Aubigny, and Troyon, and continually imagined how each painter had laid brush to paper or canvas. At the little coffee counter in the corner of the shop, Vincent was occasionally invited to sample a cup of strong black coffee, an unfamiliar drink compared to the warm milk his mother made for him each morning. The intense bitterness touched his tongue, urging him to stay more alert as he sat for hours by the window, looking out onto the damp street. Whenever a customer came to view the paintings, he would quietly step back into a corner, listen to their praise and criticism, and wonder, why don't they see the brilliant light in Millet's work? Why do they demand lofty subjects while forgetting the humble beauty of the fields, the old tiled roofs, or labourers bent over the potato rows? Gradually, the work at Goupil Cie became Vincent's first real art school. His supervisor, Monsieur Tersteeg, a descendant of the firm's original Dutch founders, often took the time to teach him how to recognise different stylistic traits, thin strokes, bold outlines, and contrasts of light and shadow. One afternoon, Monsieur Tersteeg placed a small painting by Jean-François Millet in front of Vincent and encouraged him. "Now try to paint this corner of the potato field. Don't focus on detail. Rather capture the atmosphere and emotion of the scene." Vincent picked up a sheet of unbleached grey paper and lightly sketched a few pencil strokes. Beads of sweat dotted his brow. Yet his spirits soared as the paper gradually revealed the outline of a peasant bending to turn over each clump of potatoes. This was no longer a mere drawing exercise, but felt like a dialogue between his soul and the brush. Monsieur Terstig nodded approvingly. Very good, Van Gogh. Every artist must find their own voice. You're on the right path. That affirmation was like a small spark, giving Vincent the drive to bridge the gap between schoolboy and the vast world of art. Yet on late afternoons, when the sea breeze from the Hague blew cold through the window frame, he found himself thinking of the wooden house in Zundert, his mother tending the grapevine, his brother Theo with his gentle smile, the spring rain drumming on the tin roof. In a foreign land, Vincent was still the unfamiliar boy, startled whenever adults spoke in a local dialect so different from Brabant's. Each time he slipped on a wet step, he reminded himself, I must work even harder, so I do not disappoint my parents and truly seize this opportunity. On weekends, Vincent often visited the Mauritshuis, home to the masterpieces of Vermeer, Rembrandt, and the Dutch Golden Age masters. He would stand before Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, gazing in silence at the soft light caressing the young woman's cheek, and the way shadow enveloped the jet-black background. His heart stirred fiercely, and he wondered, could I create a painting that makes viewers feel such peace and mystery? Outside the museum, beneath the wrought-iron gate shaped like curling waves, and among the dripping green trees, Vincent would sit on a worn stone step and sketch the girl's eyes again, adding a few strokes to the highlights. Passers-by watched him with curiosity, but few realised that this young lad was continuing a centuries-old Dutch painting tradition. Returning to his lodgings on the corner of Scootnij Landstraat, Vincent would often open letters from Theo in Arnhem. In each letter, Theo not only asked about his health, but also enclosed words of encouragement, sometimes postcards of the Louvre in Paris, or reproductions of works by Van Dyck and Gérôme. Those pages served as a bridge between the brothers' hearts, easing Vincent's loneliness and strengthening his resolve on the path of art. One day in the bitter early winter chill, Vincent read in the Amsterdam paper a critique by painter and critic Anton Mauve, who would become his first important teacher. In the article, Mauve praised Millet's rural scenes and depictions of labourers, emphasising that true art springs from the ability to empathise with simple life. Vincent folded the newspaper and resolved, when I have the chance, I must seek out Monsieur Mauve to learn more about oil colour techniques and canvas composition. Amid these ambitions, Christmas of 1866 drew near. On the window of the Goupil Cie shop, garlands of green leaves glittered with a light dusting of snow. Vincent was transferred to the London branch to experience a broader, international environment. On his farewell evening, Supervisor Terstig shook his hand and whispered, London will help you broaden your vision. Remember to bring your sketchbook, and don't hesitate to observe anything, from the streetcars to graffiti-covered walls. In that moment, Vincent felt as if the whole world awaited under his brush. His luggage comprised only a few stretched canvases, tubes of oil paint, and an old brush, but in his soul lay thousands of as-yet unpainted works waiting for the day they would come to life. And so, the first stepping stone on the journey from Zundert to the heart of European art was firmly laid. Vincent Willem Van Gogh, with his compassionate heart and thirst for discovery, was about to write the next wondrous chapters, where colour, light and passion would converge into immortal masterpieces. The mist-laden winter dawn of 1867 at Paddington Station welcomed Vincent Willem Van Gogh as he set foot in London for the first time. No longer the timid boy of Zundert, he now appeared as a 14-year-old youth, his sorrowful eyes framed by a well-fitting suit, a parting gift from his family. The rumbling hiss of the steam engine and the draught swirling around his shoulders made Vincent's heart flutter. A leather satchel hung at his side, holding his sketchbook, a box of oil paints, and several art volumes sent from Arnhem, faithful companions as he embarked on this new chapter of his life. On his first day at the Goupil Cie branch on 17th Southampton Street, Vincent was introduced to an international staff. the polished English gentleman, a few boastful Frenchmen, and a youthful Dutch assistant. His duties scarcely differed from those in the Hague, cataloguing prints, framing paintings, and noting supplies. Yet London's vastness offered Vincent an unprecedented vibrancy. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages over cobblestones, the call of tram whistles beckoning passengers, and the faint aroma of afternoon tea drifting from a nearby room. At every blink, countless impressions poured in. The gaslights glittering along the streets, the Thames shimmering beneath the sunset, and even the sight of wool-capped dock workers hastily shouldering sacks of wheat across the bridge. During his lunch breaks, Vincent often wandered along the riverbank, pausing before Westminster Bridge to admire the proud silhouette of the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben. He would draw out his sketchbook, striving to capture the sweeping curves of the intricate Gothic architecture, despite the biting wind whipping through his fingers. A desire to record the play of light on the rushing water urged him to experiment with swift, decisive strokes. It was then that he realised London was not merely a centre for the trade in art, but a living, visual classroom, where every scene could be transformed into a masterpiece. In the evenings after work, Vincent often sought out free art libraries, such as the South Kensington Museum, the forerunner of the Victoria and Albert. In the silent galleries, thousands of Roman Greek drawings and sculptures seemed to whisper invitations for him to study. Under the warm yellow light, he eagerly read the annotations on marble carving techniques, how sculptors managed human proportions, and the history of European art from the Middle Ages through the Renaissance. Every page, every black and white plate gripped Vincent's heart with both excitement and a thirst for knowledge. One Sunday afternoon, he heard that Jean-Philippe Doré, a renowned Anglo-French watercolour illustrator, would be exhibiting his watercolour paintings at Pall Mall. Unfazed by the distance, Vincent carried his box of watercolours and fine brushes and pushed into the crowd to admire the works. His eyes lit up when he saw the vivid colours, patches of cerulean blue and gentle rose harmonising on the paper, and the way Doré captured London's gloomy skies yet still suffused them with poetry. Vincent quietly told himself, "Oils are my passion, but watercolours can evoke equally subtle emotions." He hastily jotted notes in his sketchbook, eager to experiment later. Alongside his artistic experiences, life in London also brought challenges of language and culture. Vincent had to memorise every quick conversational phrase, practice speaking politely with customers, and even crack small jokes to make them feel at ease. Once he became flustered when a noblewoman asked the price of a landscape painting. Vincent stammered, then suddenly remembered his brother Theo's advice: always keep a confident attitude and smile. So he smiled, focused on describing the materials and the artist. The customer nodded in approval, leading Vincent to realise art is not only about colour, but also about the art of communication. At night, in his cramped lodging on Oxford Street, Vincent would sort through the pile of letters from Theo and his parents. Their comforting words, tips on arranging paintings in a living room, and comments on oil painting technique gave him renewed strength. Before falling asleep, Vincent would pull out his sketchbook, place it on his pillow, and sketch the eyes of the unfamiliar woman, the afternoon's customer, adding a hurried note. Those eyes, so deep and inquisitive. From those first bewildering days, Vincent gradually regained his confidence. The sound of brush on paper or canvas was no longer merely awkward noise, but had become a language through which he recorded the world. In the flickering candlelights of his lodging, the young man silently vowed, "By the time my brother and I are reunited in Paris, I will present these sketches to prove that I deserve to stand beside the masterpieces I admire." In January of 1868, when London's fog lay thick over every rooftop, Vincent Willem Van Gogh found himself able to navigate the city's frantic pace on his own. Each morning he rose before dawn, lit a small candle on his work table, and quickly brewed a cup of strong black tea with a bit of sugar. The bells of Westminster tolled in rapid succession, heralding a new day full of opportunities to observe and record. After his duties at Goupil Cie, Vincent no longer confined his wanderings to South Kensington or Pall Mall. He began to turn down the narrow lanes of the East End, where rows of damp red brick houses pressed tightly together. Here he discovered fresh inspiration. The weary man pulling a laden cart, the bare-headed woman stooping to wash clothes by the canal, the ragged child begging, trembling in tattered garments. Vincent jotted a few quick strokes in his sketchbook, watched the flicker of yellow lamplight through small window panes, then sought refuge from the drizzling rain in a nearly empty coffee shop, nibbling on a still warm stale roll and enveloped in the scent of damp tobacco smoke. One weekend day, Vincent heard that the Pre-Raphaelite Circle was holding an open discussion with the painter Edward Burne-Jones at Fitzroy Square. He decided to skip lunch and hurry over. In the small lecture room, members gathered around an easel laden with sketches, debating energetically how to recapture nature's purity using clear hues and meticulously detailed lines. Vincent sat quietly at the back, his eyes fixed on each brushstroke, and every analysis of light filtering through foliage. When the discussion ended, he mustered the courage to ask a few questions about watercolour mixing techniques, and was told, "Study the very essence of colour, Vincent, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself with unconventional palettes." A few days later, back in his lodging, Vincent pulled out his box of watercolours and mixed a pale pink and a cerulean blue to sketch foliage, then added a drop of bright yellow for a highlight. Each time the brush touched the paper, he felt Burne-Jones's whispered encouragement. Immerse yourself in colour, so that each patch of light and shadow tells its own story. By night, the candlelight cast his smudged strokes into relief, but Vincent's heart thrilled at the joy of experimenting for the first time with a technique so different from oil painting. Beyond the inspiring discussions, Vincent also took part in humanitarian exhibitions organised by the All Saints charity on Margaret Street. There, young artists gathered to display illustrations of impoverished labourers and to donate their sales proceeds to support orphaned children. Vincent volunteered to help clear frames and greet visitors. The sense of contributing to such a humanitarian cause touched his heart, compelling him to focus his brush on the subject of people, a decision that would stay with him for life. Winter grew ever colder. On some evenings, his roommate Hanwell Coldstream would light the wood stove, filling the room with warmth, yet Vincent's hands still turned blue as he painted into the late hours. Suddenly he realised that the value of light and shadow extended beyond the canvas into life itself. The fire's glow made the bitter cold outside the window all the more apparent. Through his small round spectacles, Vincent sketched the gaunt hands of Hanwell holding a brush, and the whispered crackle by the hearth reminded him, every portrayal of life demands sincerity and understanding. Amid his busy days, Vincent continued to receive letters from his brother Theo. In each letter, Theo described the artistic atmosphere in Paris, still life painting sessions, art classes, and daily life in Montmartre. Theo wrote, "There are so many new painters from all over Europe, experiencing a spirit of creative freedom and artistic exchange. Will you come there? I believe you will find your own voice in that liberating culture." Vincent read and reread the words, envisioning the brilliant skies of Paris, where colours intertwined along every cobblestone street. Yet London still held its own irresistible charm. One late spring afternoon, when the cherry blossoms in Hyde Park were just beginning to bud, Vincent joined a picnic outing with a group of amateur painters. They sketched the Serpentine Lake, with swans gliding quietly and the iron bridge creaking underfoot. The sunset imprinted an orange hue on the water's surface, and Vincent felt a peace he had never known. He painted incessantly, his eyes shining as he watched each reflected stroke, as if determined to capture that peaceful London moment forever. Yet fragility marked even those quiet moments, for Vincent stumbled many times. Once at a small solo exhibition by a fellow country painter in Notting Hill, he submitted one of his sketches to the organisers. The judges glanced at it and shook their heads. "There's nothing outstanding here to award, Van Gogh. Please work on developing your style and technique." Though harsh, that critique did not extinguish Vincent's passion. Rather, it steeled his resolve to hone his portrait drawing skills and master human proportions. Time flew. Nearly 2 years had passed since Vincent first stepped off at Paddington Station. He had sketched hundreds of street scenes, flower gardens, smithies, and even the hidden corners of the slums. His thick sketchbooks bore witness to an unceasing journey of learning. One March morning in 1869, Vincent received official notice from Goupil Cie, arranging a new assignment for him at the Paris branch. In the letter, his superiors praised his rapid progress in recognising artworks and in communicating with clients. Reading and rereading those lines, Vincent set down his pen and gazed out at London's overcast yet vibrant sky. He suddenly understood. Every stroke in his sketchbooks, every drop of sweat in the late-night hours, and even the bone-chilling winds had all prepared him to step into a new phase. The Paris phase, where the radiant glow of artistic triumph awaited. In April 1869, when the last cherry blossoms in Hyde Park had fallen, Vincent Willem Van Gogh boarded the train across the English Channel, carrying all his drawing tools, sketchbooks, and burning aspirations. Paris unfolded before him like a vast painting. Grey-tiled roofs sweeping over the Seine, the partially built Eiffel Tower faintly visible against the sky, and the Moulin Rouge's distant red lights glittering. Carriages festooned with flickering gas lamps and the clatter of trams made Vincent's heart race. The Goupil Cie branch on Rue de Laval was a 3-storey building with large display windows showcasing fine prints and elaborately framed paintings. Vincent was led into a grand room where dozens of works from across Europe were arranged in salon style. His supervisor, Monsieur Etienne, a lively Dutchman, raised his hand in greeting. "Welcome to Paris, Monsieur Van Gogh. Here you will handle the trade in picture cards and assist clients in finding the perfect print. But more importantly, make time for yourself. Observe the city and sketch whatever inspires you." With that, Etienne handed Vincent the key to a small lodging on the second floor, its window overlooking a cobblestone alley. Paris was damp by nature, but the early summer sun filtered gently through the window, illuminating the age-yellow walls. Vincent set down his suitcase, unpacked his sketchbook and oil paints, then grabbed his brush and strolled out into the street, as if stepping into a new world. From his very first day, Vincent did not hesitate to wander through Montmartre, the artists' quarter of small cafes, studios and taverns. He paused before the studio of Charles Anquetin, who was gaining fame for his cloisonnism style of bold colours outlined in black. Outside, Anquetin stood chatting with Louis Anquetin and Émile Bernard. Vincent waited patiently until they departed before slipping inside, holding up his sketchbook and asking, "Pardon me, sir, my name is Vincent Van Gogh from Goupil Cie, London. I greatly admire your style. May I see some of your sketches?" Anquetin, surprised but friendly, nodded and invited him in. By the flickering glow of an oil lamp, Vincent studied the vivid colour blocks, thick black outlines, and the way the artist separated forms. The two discussed Chevreul's colour theories and how to create effects through contrasting complementary hues. That night, back in his lodging, Vincent eagerly experimented, applying orange against blue, adding black borders to give a pronounced geometric feel. Time passed quickly. He spent his mornings selling prints and his afternoons sketching on plein air. The route from the Palais Royal to the Ile de la Cité held endless inspiration. He rapidly captured the solid stone bridges, the silhouettes of passers-by, and the jagged Gothic roofs. Each stroke seemed to record Paris's very breath, at once ancient and modern, quiet and clamorous. One day Vincent received an invitation from the painter Anton Mauve, the same who had earlier invited him to the Netherlands, to visit his studio in The Hague. Mauve enclosed a request to observe oil mixing techniques and still life composition. Vincent set down his pen, rubbed his eyes and decided. Once he had wrapped up his work at Goupil, he would return to Holland to visit Mauve and delve deeper into oil painting methods. But before leaving Paris, there was still so much to explore. In the evenings, he often ventured to the Salon des Refusés, the exhibition of artists rejected by the official French Salon. There he encountered Cézanne's bold strokes, Degas' ballet scenes, and Manet's stark depictions of everyday life. Standing silently before Manet's Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, Vincent reflected, art is no longer merely the copying of reality. It is how we tell stories, evoke emotion, and challenge traditional perspectives. Not content with painting alone, Vincent also immersed himself in Parisian literature. He read Balzac and Flaubert, and even tried writing short passages describing the city streets. But he soon realised that words could never capture the shimmering colours in his mind, and he resolved to tell his stories only with the brush. Amid all the excitement, Vincent stayed in regular contact with his brother Theo. In his letters, Theo described plans to open a small gallery in Montparnasse, where they could exhibit each other's paintings. "Paris is changing by the minute," Theo wrote. "We must seize that spirit. Don't be afraid to create something different." Those words gave Vincent strength to endure lonely nights in his cold boarding room. By late summer, Goupil Cie threw a small party for the Paris staff. Under lantern light and to the strains of Vivaldi, Vincent met in person the directors from London and The Hague. They praised his eagerness to improve, and one even suggested that Vincent produce a series of prints titled Paris by Night for international display. The idea thrilled him. He pictured quick sketches of nearly empty streets under gaslight, tree shadows cast on the damp pavement, and the warm glow of late-night shop windows. Surrounded by the festive atmosphere, Vincent closed his eyes, inhaled colleagues' wine and cigar smoke, and smiled, realising Paris was no longer just a temporary stop, but the place where dreams come true. From Zundert to The Hague, then London, he was now entering a fully ripened phase, ready to pour his soul into colour and light to create deeply personal works. In Vincent's heart, every facet of Paris, its bustle, its romance, its restlessness, stood ready to be translated into the language of brush and oil. In late autumn of 1875, when the yellow leaves began to turn brown and fall sparsely along the Paris sidewalks, Vincent Willem Van Gogh felt an unfillable emptiness in his heart. After 6 years tied to the art trade at Goupil Cie, the young man had learned how the art market operated, how to distinguish styles, master terminology, but he increasingly wondered, did his soul truly live off lifeless prints? One drizzly afternoon, he strode along Rue de Laval, taking in the posters advertising upcoming exhibitions, then paused before a large mirror hanging in the shop's foyer. The oil lamp glow cast his gaunt face and the dark circles under his eyes, signs of late-night brooding. And Vincent suddenly realised, I am lost. Amid glittering Paris, a deep desire to bring brush and oil paint to those in hardship would not be silenced. He recalled his youth in Zundert, where the village fell silent each dusk, his mother lighting candles on the dining table, and his father preaching salvation through faith. As a boy, Vincent had even dreamed of becoming a minister, joining simple missionary work. But his family had steered him toward commerce in hopes of a more secure future. Now, retracing those memory-laden streets, he heard a quiet call. An artist's heart cannot remain an outside observer. It must enter in and share. After many sleepless nights, Vincent wrote his letter of resignation to Goupil Cie. The board, surprised but sympathetic, agreed to release him without any binding clauses. He packed his small suitcase once again, with sketchbooks, leftover tubes of oil paint, and the old family Bible his father had given him in childhood, and set a date for his return to the Netherlands, where his parents and brother Theo awaited. His journey home began by train through the sunlit Champagne countryside, then on to the misty port of Ostend, before boarding the ferry across the English Channel. On deck, the cold wind slapped his face as Vincent quietly gazed out at the vast sea, as though he could hear the waves whispering him to forget all worldly vanity. He remembered Theo's words, "Do what you truly believe in, and I will always stand by you." That comfort calmed Vincent's heart and strengthened his resolve for the new path ahead. When he first arrived in the Borinage region of Hainault, the land of sweat and coal dust, the air weighed heavily with the mine's soot, as if it had clogged the sky. Hundreds of weary miners, their wool caps coated in dust, lamps slung at their waists and pipes clamped between their lips, bent to enter the deep shafts. Vincent, wearing a coarse linen coat, knocked gently on the door of the humble parsonage and asked to assist the Protestant pastor in the small church. The locals, at first wary, doubtful that a painter who had lived in the city of light could understand their suffering, gradually accepted him when they saw the sincerity in his eyes and the way his brush bore muddy browns. They welcomed him as a silent friend. Each morning Vincent accompanied Pastor Descruc to distribute bread and milk to orphaned children. Each afternoon he sat by a mineshaft entrance and sketched miners bent at their work under the weak glow of their lamps. His first strokes captured the miners' bowed backs and the beads of sweat on their brows so vividly they were haunting. After these spiritual labours, he led small Bible readings for the villagers, offering words of comfort and hope. In the damp little room, Vincent's gentle voice echoed like a wandering prayer. Gradually, the painter's fervour became a bridge to the community. The miners would pause their labours and nod when he explained the lost sheep in the scriptures, then share stories of their families and the scars the furnace's heat had left on their eyes. Vincent recorded everything, not just in writing but also in sketches. A wife waiting at the door, a trembling child wrapped in a thin blanket, a woman carrying wood through the winter dusk. Each image became a brick in the foundation of his profound compassion, teaching him that true art must awaken empathy and faith. Outside work hours, Vincent sought the stony hills near the mines, where fields of wildflowers still bloomed in gold, as if offering warmth to labour-scarred hearts. Seated beneath a small olive tree, he would draw out his sketchbook and quietly mix earthen browns, pale indigo, and sunset yellows, striving to capture the intersection of two worlds, the mine's darkness and the hope in those blossoms. In that moment, the wind's whisper through the grasses seemed to affirm, even in suffering, light will rise. Before he knew it, more than a year had passed in the Borinage. The villagers called him the painter minister, for at every prayer service they both heard scripture and admired his sketches of wildflowers and sombre labour scenes. Then one late winter afternoon, Vincent received a letter from Theo in the Netherlands. "I've arranged lodging for you in Etten near Delft. I think you should leave Borinage for a while and devote time to oil painting technique and still life studies. When you're ready, we'll begin anew together." The letter's urging made clear. Borinage had taught Vincent lessons in compassion and love, but now the young painter must return to colour on canvas, turning those experiences into works that would last beyond time. Vincent Willem Van Gogh left the Borinage in early spring of 1877, carrying with him wet ink sketches and a heart that had known both sorrow and love. The train carried him back to the village of Etten, where his parents and his brother Theo were living. Stepping off the platform, Vincent immediately sensed the gentle air of the Dutch countryside, the canal's clear green water, windmills punctuating the sky, and shy tulip beds showing their colours. Theo stood waiting on the platform with a warm smile. "Welcome back. I've arranged a place for you next to Mauve's studio. You'll have your own room and a nicer corner to paint." Settling into the little house by the canal, Vincent unpacked his oil paint box, brushes, and the unfinished copy of The Art of Light. The next morning he crossed the wooden bridge to Anton Mauve's studio on Voorstraat. Mauve, his mentor and first teacher of oil techniques, greeted him like a close brother. "You're here at last. Let's experiment with some new techniques. Palette knife painting, heavy impasto, and using bright highlights." Under Mauve's careful instruction, Vincent first learned to lay down a ground layer to support light and dark values, then to scrape paint directly onto canvas with a knife, building thickness and texture in each chrysanthemum petal, brick wall, and roof tile. His hand trembled on the first try, But Mauve encouraged him. Art is not just colour, it's material and spontaneous movement. Let every gesture leave its mark on the canvas. Thanks to these shared sessions, Vincent progressed quickly. While Mauve favoured muted tones, Vincent gradually found his own voice. Brilliant yellows, fresh spring greens, and white highlights that made the light dance. He sketched the Eton windmill with a knife, creating bold, vibrant strokes that contrasted sharply with Mauve's delicate style. Beyond technique, Vincent and Mauve delved deeply into Vincent's passion for working people, sparked in the Borinage. Mauve introduced him to Eugène Delacroix's writings on expressing emotion through gesture and clarity of motion. Through hours of conversation, Vincent realised that to paint the human soul, he could not merely copy forms. He needed to convey breath and feeling. One afternoon, Theo took his brother to a nearby farm where the owner raised cattle and grew sugar beets. In the green meadow, cows wandered leisurely, and the young herdsman strolled by with his wooden staff. Vincent sank onto a stone step, opened his sketchbook, and quickly captured the scene. The plump cow's body, its alert ears, its gentle gaze. When he turned to draw the herdsman, he noted the figure's slight lean, the straw hat shading half his face, and the staff resting on his shoulder. In that instant, humanity and nature merged into a single harmonious form, filling Vincent with awe at the nobility in everyday life. Back in the studio, Vincent eagerly painted the beet harvest, using blocks of yellow, brown and blue. He applied thick paint like wrinkled earth, each flake of soil seeming to leap off the canvas. He hoped the work would evoke not just a rural scene, but the breath of sweat, the smell of moist soil, and a yearning for plenty. Over time, the young painter found his balance between Mauve's techniques and his own emerging voice. Quietly, he submitted the beet harvest to a Dutch art journal, eager for feedback. Though the waiting was tense, Vincent knew that every brushstroke taught him something valuable. In his heart, he believed that one day soon, the story of the labouring people in the Dutch countryside he painted would touch viewers' souls, and that this, he felt, was art's true mission. In mid-May of 1877, the sea breeze from the port of Rotterdam carried a briny, seaweed-tinged scent into Eton, reminding Vincent Willem Van Gogh that the world beyond his village was vast. Although he had found inspiration in oil painting techniques, he still yearned to try his hand at still lifes, an area he had once neglected in the Borinage. Now beneath the almond tree shading Mauve's studio door, Vincent arranged 2 green apples, a few carrots, and a smooth white earthenware jug on a wooden panel to begin his first still life session. The gentle afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, illuminating the dark ground layer Mauve had taught him to mix. Vincent carefully marked out his composition, the apples tucked to one corner, the carrots leaning in parallel, the jug standing as a central anchor. He lifted his brush, applied the first dabs of pale yellow, then added soft green strokes to capture the apple's dew-filled sheen. With each brushstroke, he felt as though he could hear the apple's sap stirring. Turning to the carrots, he mixed a deep orange tempered with brown to subtly conceal the cut marks, then dotted on pure white highlights to suggest lingering moisture. The jug was more than an inert prop. It symbolised form and light. Vincent used a warm white to echo the dying rays reflected on its glaze. Throughout the session, he listened quietly to the cicadas whirring in the tree, the rustle of leaves at the wall's foot, and his own measured breathing, all merging into the stillness. As the afternoon waned and shadows spread over the canvas, Vincent faced his greatest challenge: how to preserve the life hidden within these inanimate objects. He stepped back, surveyed the whole, and decided to use his palette knife to build a thick impasto in the darker areas, giving the composition greater realism. By candlelight when night fell, his still life with apples and carrots gradually took shape. Imperfect perhaps, but already bearing the young artist's unique voice. Yet his thirst for growth did not end there. One morning word reached him of a travelling exhibition in Den Bosch, featuring French painters whose works were touring Europe. Undeterred by the journey, He caught a local train, crossed fields of oilseed rape, and arrived in the small city. At the exhibition he stood riveted before Gustave Courbet's The Peasant's Kitchen, marvelling at the way Courbet rendered every callus on a potholder's hand, the rough texture of the hearth, and the flicker of a lamp's flame. Vincent realised that realism was more than copying reality. It demanded that the artist courageously portray life in its rawest form. Back in Eton, Vincent carried this newfound inspiration home. He took his pastels and made quick studies of the little inn where his uncle lodged labourers, where his mother distributed bread. The chipped wooden benches, the dangling electric cord of a lone lamp, and the rich aroma of diluted coffee, all were captured in bold strokes that evoked a warm, rustic atmosphere. Meanwhile, his relationship with Mauve grew more nuanced. The kindly mentor began to express concern when Vincent piled on impasto so thickly that it threatened to overwhelm the subtleties of light. One afternoon, Mauve gently reminded him, "Remember, emotion is carried by light and shadow, not by sheer volume of paint." Vincent took the advice to heart, thinning his ground layer and focusing more on tonal transitions than on thick build-up. In time, the Van Gogh household rejoiced when two of his works, The Eton Windmill and Still Life with Apples and Carrots, were selected for publication in Kunst en Letteren, a prestigious Dutch art journal. Weeks of anxious waiting gave way to quiet pride. Vincent gazed out the window at the last blooming tulips and thanked both Theo and Mauve for guiding him through his early struggles and helping him find his personal voice. Late that spring, when the soft sunlight filtered through fresh leaves, Vincent decided on a short trip to Lisse, the bulb flower region famed for its endless tulip fields. He packed a portable easel, a few tubes of paint, and a small canvas shelter. Before the sea of blossoms, reds, yellows and purples mingling harmoniously, he painted feverishly, striving to capture each trembling petal. The morning dew on the tulips became a crucial highlight, infusing his sketch, Field of Tulips at Lisse, with the breath of spring and overflowing hope. Upon returning to Eton, the completed study not only demonstrated his technical confidence, but also embodied a spirit of reverence for humble beauty, conveying to viewers that even amid life's harshness, there are moments of wonder that warm the heart. Vincent placed the sketch by the window, watched sunlight filter through the pale glass, and thought to himself, "This is only the beginning. An entire world of colour and humanity still awaits me." In midsummer of 1877, when golden sunlight bathed all of Holland, Vincent Willem Van Gogh decided to move to The Hague for more formal training under the guidance of the painter Anton Mauve. On the horse-drawn carriage crossing fields of deep green corn, he carried his suitcase of oil paints, sketchbook, and a thick treatise on human anatomy. For the first time, Vincent was no longer a roaming free spirit, but entered the disciplined world of art school, where each hour was devoted to lessons in proportion, perspective, and anatomy. In the small boarding room on Brouwersgracht, right next door to Mauve's studio, Vincent set up his painting corner, a sturdy wooden easel, brushes arranged by size, and a jar for mixing turpentine. Mauve advised him, "Begin with still lifes, then move on to portraits, and finally study the live model's pose. Be patient. Technique will form the foundation for your emotional expression later." On his first day in Mauve's class, Vincent and several young artists gathered around a wooden model, a meticulously copied Roman sculpture. Under the warm glow of an oil lamp, they sketched head, torso, arms and legs in charcoal, learning to measure the relative lengths of each part. Vincent carefully marked proportions, stepped back to view the whole, then corrected the statue's shoulder line with a few hatching strokes. Though his lines were still awkward, he silently realised this was a necessary step to truly understand bodily structure, crucial for future portraits. The second lesson focused on perspective. Mauve brought into the studio a miniature room model complete with window, table, chairs, and bookshelf. Vincent and his classmates practiced identifying the horizon line, vanishing point, and vantage angle. He drew parallel lines with concentration, occasionally tilting his head to check the angle. When the sketch was complete, Mauve nodded. "You've grasped the basics. Now try adding light streaming through the window and casting shadows on the floor." Following this advice, Vincent mixed a pale beige for the walls and a warm grey for the floor, then used white to emphasise the sunbeam. The shadow beneath the wooden table appeared soft, creating depth in the space. A sense of accomplishment made Vincent smile. Perspective was no longer dry theory, but a tool to bring a two-dimensional world to life. Outside the studio, the Hague buzzed with print shops, canal-side cafes, and marsh parks strewn with wildflowers. One afternoon, Mauve took Vincent to the Mesdag Museum, which displayed Hendrik Willem Mesdag's collection of sea and landscape paintings. Before Mesdag's vast North Sea panorama, tens of metres long, Vincent was awestruck by how he used blues and greys to convey the surge and crash of waves. Mauve pointed out, "Watch how the painter zones colour to suggest the wave cresting then collapsing. You can learn to load paint and use a palette knife to recreate that effect." Back in the studio, Vincent experimented immediately. He mixed deep ultramarine with a touch of white to paint a wave streak, then used a palette knife to raise ridges of paint on canvas, highlighting the bright water under the afternoon sun. Each stroke felt like a dare to conquer his brush, forcing Vincent to move with decisiveness. Alongside mastering technique, Vincent's interest in urban life grew. On sleepless nights in his boarding room, he peered through the window at horse-drawn traffic and the first electric lights flickering on Grote Markt. He sketched nocturnal street scenes, noting the blend of gaslight and electric glow and the hurried silhouettes of people returning home. In his sketchbook, each page became a study of light. A principle Mauve often reminded him: light is the soul of the painting. One day, while sketching a still life of a blazing sunflower in Mauve's studio, Vincent learned that his brother Theo would arrive in The Hague at month's end. Excitement welled within him. Soon he would have a companion to share his joys and challenges. Vincent carefully gathered his finest studies, planning to present them to Theo as proof of his progress. The night before their reunion, Vincent sat by the window under silver moonlight filtering through the plane tree leaves. He surveyed the chalk sketches and dried paint strokes on canvas and thought, "I've grown. My technique is solid. Now I must let my emotions sink deeply into every painting." Placing his hand on his sketchbook, Vincent smiled confidently. His formal studies had only just begun, but the fusion of Dutch school discipline and his personal passion would forge an artistic voice unlike any other. Late in September, when the cool autumn wind had begun to blow, Theo's footsteps echoed across the wooden footbridge outside Vincent's lodging. The door opened, and for the first time in years, the brothers embraced amid the quiet dawn of The Hague. Golden sunlight filtered through the window as Theo carried a thick portfolio of exhibition contracts, invitations from dealers in Amsterdam, and an offer to audit classes at the Royal Academy of Art. That midday, beneath the weeping willow by the canal, Vincent led Theo past the sketches pinned on the studio walls. From the Etten windmill to still life with apples and carrots, then his studies of Ostend's harbour. Each piece bore the signature palette knife technique he'd learned from Mauve. Theo studied them closely and nodded. "You've progressed so quickly. Your colours are rich and your textures clear, but if you added a stronger focal highlight in the centre to guide the viewer's eye, the composition would truly sing." Vincent listened, lightly stroking a swathe of golden paint on the canvas. The distant clack of oars on the water sounded like a drumbeat cheering them on. This was the moment their two artistic souls connected. That afternoon, Theo took Vincent to the Royal Academy on Prinsessengracht. In a small exhibition hall, the young painter sketched a fellow student, a dark-haired Italian with deep eyes, under dim lighting. He challenged himself with shading and skin tone control, a base of pale pink with a touch of grey for warmth, then a hint of violet in the eye's corner to convey a pensive mood. When he laid down his brush, the portrait sprang to life, and the model smiled. "You paint so beautifully. It's as if I'm looking into a mirror." Seeing the model's astonished expression, Vincent silently thanked Mauve for guiding his fundamentals, which now freed him to convey the human spirit. That evening, over a wooden table, the brothers chatted about future plans. Theo described Amsterdam's vibrant art scene, where dealers were taking note of the thick colour, pre-impressionist style, and suggested Vincent apply for a group show at the Société des Artistes Français. Vincent eagerly jotted notes. "I'll select some still lifes and rural scenes to exhibit. Please tell me if they're appropriate." The next day, Vincent and Theo visited Uncle Henry's quiet cafe, hung with sketches of everyday life. Uncle Henry peered at them. "You're welcome to sketch here as much as you like. But if you intend to sell your work, you'll need strategy. Among all those floral studies and minor scenes, you must offer something unique." Theo nodded and began outlining channels to reach patrons, salons in Antwerp and Brussels. Vincent realised talent is only half the equation. The other half is getting your work before the public. In the following days, Vincent spent hours surveying Oude Molstraat, where young artists gathered. He sketched dozens of quick studies: the baker's face over a counter, a wooden chair in a tavern, the flower seller carrying her straw hat. Each drawing lasted only minutes, but provided reference for larger canvases. Gradually, the studio wall filled with sketchbooks brimming with human figures and urban memories. One sunset, as slanted light streamed through the studio window, Vincent sat before a large blank canvas, his sketch for By the Hague Canal. He mixed emerald green, sunset yellow, and ash grey, then swept broad swaths of colour to evoke a hushed mood. His brushstrokes, like fine waves, traced watermarks across the canvas. In that moment, he felt cityscape and countryside still life merge, his inner world and outer environment intertwined in each layer of paint. That weekend, with Theo's help, Vincent delivered 3 small paintings to the Société Gallery on Keizersgracht. The clerk registered his submission, noted the details, and scheduled a hanging date. Vincent's heart pounded. This was the first time his work would hang alongside those of European painters. He gently gripped Theo's hand, eyes shining with conviction. "I'm ready." And so, Vincent Willem Van Gogh's first work went up on the gallery wall, opening a new chapter in his life. When Dutch technique met personal aspiration, and the dream of art stepped into the light of the exhibition hall. During his first week in The Hague, Vincent Willem Van Gogh spent his mornings in Anton Mauve's studio and his afternoons wandering the streets around the Binnenhof and the Grote Kerk. He realised that the grounds of the old government palace were a rich source of inspiration for both landscapes and scenes of everyday life. One chilly afternoon, as the sunset bathed the rooftops in gold, Vincent came across a group of young women in hand-knit sweaters gathering small kumquats beneath a willow by the canal. He quickly opened his sketchbook and made rapid studies of their seated poses, the slight bend of their arms, and their intent expressions. His rough lines gradually refined as he stepped back, added the kumquats' red dots and touched in the whites of their hats, capturing the late autumn atmosphere. The next day, Mauve assigned Vincent a special portrait lesson from a live model. In the warm studio, a middle-aged woman named Maria sat on a chair, candlelight flickering beneath the table. Mauve reminded him, "Observe the planes of her face, the light on her cheekbones, then lay in your ground layer quickly before the light changes." Vincent applied a pale beige base, sketched her facial structure, then used warm pinks on her cheeks and a hint of violet at the corners of her eyes to convey her quiet concern. Under his brush, Maria's likeness became more than a portrait. It told a story of time and early rise mornings spent earning a living. When he was done, Mauve nodded in approval. "You've grasped your values. Now refine the details to express her emotion more clearly." As he sketched the portrait, Vincent thought back to his still life studies of apples, carrots, and windmills. Now his subject was a living person, marking a turning point. He was no longer merely capturing form, but evoking human narrative. That weekend, Theo visited the studio, carrying a basket of purple violets, his mother's favourite. and asked Vincent to paint a still life incorporating the flowers. Vincent placed a few violet blossoms beside a terracotta jug, added a ripe apple, and used his palette knife to build thick petals. Each violet seemed to tremble, drawing the viewer's eye to the composition's focal point. When he finished, Theo admired, "The violets don't just serve as background, they shape the space and guide the eye to the heart of the painting. You found a powerful way to blend still life and decorative motif." From those sessions, Vincent honed his sense of texture and colour harmony. He began experimenting with mixed media, applying oil paint over a smooth ground, then accenting fine details with pastel. One day, Mauve excitedly dabbed at a blank patch on Vincent's canvas to create a faint marble effect. Vincent realised that flexible use of materials not only broadened his expressive range, but also helped forge his unique style. On late nights by the canal, with streetlights reflected on the water, Vincent sketched Canal by Night, using swift brushstrokes to trace the gaslight reflections and dotting spots of gold to vary the glow. His sketchbooks filled, mapping his journey from still lifes and portraits to urban landscapes. In mid-August, The Hague hosted a group exhibition of young Dutch painters. Vincent submitted 3 works: Portrait of Maria, Violet Still Life, and Canal by Night. At the opening, Theo introduced him to critics and buyers. Under the soft gallery lights, the painter's scenes of daily life were on display, and Vincent was amazed when a patron purchased Portrait of Maria, saying, "This painting conveys intimacy and depth, rare in a young artist's work." Joy and pride filled Vincent's heart. Every night he had spent mastering technique, every session of rapid sketching, and every moment of failure back in London, all had converged in this achievement. He smiled and squeezed his brother's hand. "We are on the right path." In the reflections of the gallery windows he saw his newfound mission, not merely to paint for himself, but to share feeling and story with the world. Thus, entering a season of maturity, the young artist was ready to expand his creative horizons and embrace the challenges and experiences that lay ahead. Late in the autumn of 1877, as the wind turned sharply cool, Vincent felt the growing rift between himself and Anton Mauve. Their once warm, technique-filled painting sessions had grown tense when Vincent insisted on experimenting with new materials and colour palettes. One late afternoon in the studio, thick with the smell of turpentine, Mauve folded a critique sheet and said, "Focus on still lifes and rural scenes. That's enough with this heavy impasto. Return to the subtlety of thin layers, or you'll lose the luminosity in your work." Vincent said nothing, his eyes fixed on the thick swathes of paint on his nearly finished By the Hague Canal. He realised he could not simply follow a formula. His emotions and personality needed to emerge in every ridge of paint, every brushstroke. That night, in his small boarding room, he wrote to Theo, "I am grateful for all Mauve has taught me, but my heart demands breaking out of these constraints. I fear that if I stay confined to my teacher's style, I will never find my own voice." Theo answered quickly, encouraging him to seek his own path, whether in Paris or the distant countryside, as long as it allowed creative freedom. A month later, Vincent packed up his supplies, said farewell to Mauve, and moved to Drenthe, the wild northern province of Holland, where marshes stretched far under a wind-tossed birch canopy. A kindly innkeeper in the small town of New Amsterdam found him a tiny attic room above the taverna. Each morning he walked the muddy footpath past silvered reeds into untouched wilderness. First he sketched the moor at dawn. Olive-tinged mist hovered, the ground wept dark yellow water, and silvery seed heads formed runways through the marsh. Vincent laid down swift strokes of ashen blue and pale ochre to evoke that humid stillness. Fragile morning light filtered through each reed, leaving a narrow beam across the peat. His study, Drenthe at dawn, was imperfect in detail, but suffused with a haunting, otherworldly calm. Next, he focused on a Drenthe country lane. Before him lay a winding red earth track framed by rows of birch, their fallen leaves forming a faded gold carpet. Where a cartwheel had gouged the mud, He used his palette knife to raise rough ridges of thick paint. Patches of orange, yellow and brown intermingled, telling the story of damp weather while still radiating simple rustic charm. Each evening Vincent brought his sketches back to the inn, asking the landlord and passers-by for their thoughts. They said, "Your paintings make Drenthe seem both lonely and alive." Those few words warmed his heart and convinced him that true art need not be conventionally beautiful, but must evoke a fragile emotion in its viewer. One frigid winter night, as the north wind howled at the window panes, Vincent lit a small candle, sat before his easel, and tried a new subject: shepherd and flock. He sketched a group of soft wool, sheep grazing by a narrow canal, rolling hills rising behind them. Using white pastel and touches of grey-tinted pink, he gave the sheep the lightness of drifting clouds. By candlelight, that gentle scene seemed to chase away the chill, offering warmth and protection. Thus, in the solitude of Drenthe, Vincent found the freedom to experiment and to listen to his own instincts. Each study marked a shift, from rough impasto to delicate knife work, from town still lifes to untamed landscapes, and above all, from quiet sketches to works that breathe with life. Though far from his mentor's embrace, he felt a growing inner strength, the seedbed for the masterpieces yet to come. In the early spring of 1880, after nearly 2 years roaming throughout the Netherlands, Vincent Willem Van Gogh returned to Paris, where his brother Theo and the artistic community awaited him. When the French train pulled into Gare du Nord, Vincent carried with him his sketches: Drenthe at dawn, Drenthe country lane, and shepherd and flock, proofs of his journey of free exploration of landscape and distinctive technique. En route la piste, Theo greeted him with a smile. "Paris hasn't changed much, but you are different." Theo's small studio in Montmartre was overflowing with tubes of paint, easels, and several large canvases gifted by the painters Bernard and Anquetin. The cosy room became a gathering place for talented outsiders: Paul Gauguin with his cloisonnism innovations, Émile Bernard with his flat graphic lines, and Toulouse-Lautrec with his sharply satirical style. Every evening, oil lamps flickered as laughter filled the room and glasses of red wine were passed around to stoke inspiration. Vincent laid out his Drenthe studies and told everyone about the marshes, the reed fields, and the cold north wind. Paul Gauguin, watching intently, praised him. "Your earth tones are so rich, the landscape seems alive. We should try combining woodcut textures with oil to heighten that rustic feel." Émile Bernard added, "Don't forget to reduce detail and focus on broad colour areas. Japanese prints are all the rage. You could learn from their bold, flat compositions." Their advice was a revelation to Vincent. After a period of free exploration, he needed to fuse the best of various schools with his own identity to create a new style, not relying solely on heavy impasto or misty still lifes. The next morning, under the gentle sunlight in the Montmartre gardens, Vincent and Gauguin sketched an olive grove together. Gauguin used vibrant reds, yellows, and greens, while Vincent chose more subdued tones and added light black outlines for depth. Though their styles contrasted, placing their canvases side by side on the easel created an exciting, complementary effect, prompting both to consider new combinations. That afternoon, Vincent spent time at the Musée d'Orsay, revisiting works by Morisot, Monet, and Renoir. In the waning light, Monet's bursting colours on the Giverny pond and Renoir's delicate dabs made Vincent appreciate anew the value of light and movement. He stepped back to study Impression, Soleil Levant, thinking to himself, quick dabs, true to life, and pour emotion into every stroke. When night fell in his small room, Vincent took out his sketchbook and experimented, diluting oil with turpentine to capture the Montmartre street lamps, using short dabs instead of thick sweeps of paint. His heart raced as he first tried blending impasto accents with impressionist dots. His sketchbook filled with shimmering patches of yellow, grey and blue, composing a visual symphony of Paris by night. In the days that followed, Vincent decided to hold a small exhibition at the Café Le Tambourin near Place Pigalle. He hung 10 paintings, still lifes, country landscapes, city scenes, and a few quick portrait studies of friends in his circle. At the opening that night, guests included fellow artists, critics, and local art lovers. The clink of glasses echoed through the space, and Vincent watched as viewers' eyes passed over each work, pausing at Drenthe at dawn and Montmartre lights. Many praised the unique blend of rustic emotion and urban colour. As the evening wore on, Vincent stood by the cafe window, gazing at the golden streetlights. He thought to himself, I came to Paris this time not just to sell paintings, but to find myself among countless styles. In his heart, though the journey ahead remained long, this moment stood as proof of his growth and his fearless willingness to change. Not long after the exhibition at Le Tambourin, Vincent Willem Van Gogh's reputation in Montmartre began to spread through whispers of the artist who brought Drenthe's colours to Paris. Each morning he rose before sunrise, put on his heavy coat, picked up his paint box and folding easel, and followed the cobblestones to the Café La Mère Léa, where colleagues gathered for lively debates. There, Paul Signac was engrossed in discussing pointillism with Émile Bernard, while Toulouse-Lautrec hunched over sketching an opera singer at a small table. Vincent joined the spirited atmosphere, and the range of artistic topics felt richer than ever, from southern light to the cool tones of mountain towns, from refined still lifes to expansive labour scenes. Every afternoon he returned to his brother Theo's modest studio on Rue Le Pic to review his progress. His painting Montmartre Lights drew praise from critic Gustave Geffroy, but also stern advice from painter Félix Bracquemond, who said the impasto needed restraint. Theo encouraged him. Don't let criticism hold you back. Everyone sees differently, but what matters is that you stay true to your own emotions and colour language. It was at that moment that Vincent accepted an offer to sign with a small gallery in Brussels, where French-Belgian patrons were interested in a style half impressionist, half realist. The invitation read, "We are ready to exhibit your series of Drenthe landscapes and violet still lifes at Galerie de l'Art Libre this coming autumn." Excitement surged, and Vincent and Theo reworked his catalogue, photographed his key works, and enclosed a letter explaining the deeper meaning of landscape and working people subjects. Before departing, he spent his final Paris afternoon sketching his brother Theo's portrait, a simple scene of Theo's sketchbook, paint tubes, and the late afternoon light streaming through the window. Using light palette knife strokes, Vincent captured the lines at Theo's eyes and his warm gaze, as though preserving this precious moment of reunion. When the canvas was done, they embraced at length, words unnecessary. Brotherly love itself was their greatest encouragement in shared artistic ambition. In Brussels, Galerie de l'Art Libre stood on Avenue Louise, in the prosperous city centre. Vincent's paintings were hung alongside works by Signac and Pissarro, forming a captivating Northern European painting corner. Strollers paused at Drenthe Village Road, praising his handling of colour blocks and subtle tonal shifts. Many young collectors admired the Beet Harvest and purchased it as a gift. Vincent stood by a glass of sarsaparilla, absorbing both praise and inquiries about price, and smiled to himself. My dream of sharing rustic beauty with viewers has taken another step. Amid success in Brussels, Vincent also felt a deep longing for Paris and Zundert. A letter from Theo in Hague, Montmartre urged him to return to help plan a curated collection, with an accompanying book Theo would compile. Prepare a few more Paris night scenes, some street still lifes, and remember to send your sketch of the Chapel of Mont Saint-Vincent, our major joint project, Theo wrote. A new goal was set, not a standalone show, but a carefully arranged portfolio titled Seasons and Light, to preserve the full arc of his creative journey. Vincent's next chapter would take him south, in search of Europe's more radiant light beyond Paris. He and Theo chose Arles, in Provence, as their destination. where crystal clear skies, endless sunflower fields, and simple rural life promised vibrant paintings. Before leaving, Vincent penned a thank you to the Brussels dealer, arranged shipment for 15 canvases, and packed his autumn in Paris memories into his case. Brussels' late autumn air was crisp, red leaves drifting along the streets, yet in Vincent's heart, the golden hues of Provence already reigned. The young painter quietly looked up through the cafe window, inhaled deeply, and made a vow. Arles, I will bring my stories of colour and light to you. When the train left Lille heading south, the crisp air slowly gave way to warm breezes scented with dried grass and Provençal red earth. Vincent Willem Van Gogh stepped off at Arles station on a brilliant autumn afternoon. The sunset's golden light stretched across honeystone walls, turning each block into a smouldering ember. Before him lay Place Lamartine, where the ginkgo's ancient branches cast lacy shadows on the flagstones, and, off in the distance, the Rhône flowed gently. He inhaled deeply, as if drawing in every ray of that unique southern French light. Theo had arranged for Vincent a small room near the restaurant Le Café de la Gare, a friendly spot always ready with a glass of red Luberon wine. At the window-side painting table, Vincent set up his portable easel, oil paint tubes, and sketchbook. On his very first morning, he quickly sketched 2 studies. Street corner in Arles, with the dark silhouette of the ginkgo shading the cafe's terrace, and honey-coloured houses, a row of sunlit stone walls under a deep blue sky. Though his brushstrokes were rough, they pulsed with life. The sun, the breeze, the aromas, and the unhurried rhythm of small-town life. At midday, Vincent visited his landlady's cafe, Madame Laurence, an Italian-born Frenchwoman. She offered him olive oil bread and a bowl of green bean soup, then proudly told him that Van Gogh père, the father of another famed painter, had once passed through here a century before. Vincent paused, smiled, and thought, the spirit of art still drifts down these streets. Madame Laurence then led him to her sunflower garden behind the house, where a few blooms were just unfurling. The golden heads, aglow in the sun, beckoned the painter to set up his easel right there. As afternoon deepened, Vincent hurried out to the vast sunflower fields on the town's outskirts. Among the riot of gold, stems and blossoms bent in the breeze, he chose a viewpoint and divided his canvas into 3 bands: sky, blazing flowerhead, and a dusty path leading to the foothills. With practiced hand and fervent emotion, he laid down dabs of yellow, orange, and brown, blending them into his study, Sunflower Field. Beads of sweat on his brow reminded him he had never felt more alive. But it wasn't only the landscape that captivated him. Arlesian life did too. One morning Vincent spotted Madame Jeanne, the tavern owner, washing glasses with cool well water. The light filtering through the building caressed her cheek, creating sharp contrasts. Vincent asked her to pose, then sketched his portrait, Jeanne, at the tavern. With decisive strokes, he rendered her weathered, yet gentle features, conveying her quiet resilience. When the study was finished, Jeanne exclaimed, "You've made me look so youthful. Thank you, monsieur." He replied softly, "Nature is the truest beauty, madame." Day by day, Vincent completed larger paintings. Shepherd dogs on the Alpilles hills, in ashen greys and blues, St. Paul Chapel, with the sunlight flickering through tree shadows, a narrow street in Arles by night, punctuated with twinkling gaslight dots. After each session, he jotted himself technical notes. Increase contrast, add orange spots to the blue background, soften the outlines. Alongside painting, Vincent exchanged letters daily with his brother Theo. In each letter, Theo reminded him to mind his materials. Buy a few thicker linen canvases and mix your paints a bit drier to preserve vibrancy. Those suggestions became Vincent's guiding principles whenever he prepared his palettes. One late October afternoon, Arles's market burst with colour. Vendors offered grapes, olives, bundles of lavender, and local tarts. Vincent wove through the throng, making lightning-quick sketches. The lavender's purple hue, olives' green sheen, tomatoes' bright red. He planned to synthesize these into a painting called Market at Arles, capturing the South's rich abundance. Under dazzling skies, his sketches danced across the page. When night fell, Vincent returned to his lodgings, tacked his market study beside Sunflower Field, and Jean at the tavern. Standing before the wall like an audience at a private show, he thought, Arles has given me endless inspiration. Now it's time to turn it into masterpieces. Night deepened. The cicada's silent hum drifted past the window as the painter worked his colours, ready to welcome the next chapters of his life, filled with light and colour. Spring of 1888, in Arles, brought Vincent Willem Van Gogh an abundance of inspiration as radiant as the southern sun itself. As the sunflower fields slowly unfurled their buds, and the air filled with a gentle floral perfume, the painter immersed himself in colour and light. One morning, gazing toward the sun-scorched Crow Hills, Vincent conceived a singular series of still lifes. Sunflowers, symbols of life and hope under the fierce Provençal sun. He rolled up his shirt sleeves and mixed fresh lemon yellow with deep cadmium orange to test 3 distinct shades. On the pristine white canvas, Vincent laid in thick impasto strokes forming a cluster of sunflowers turned towards the morning light. Each petal seemed to tremble, beckoning, believe in a glorious day. He meticulously dotted tiny flecks of white at each flower's centre, evoking sunlight streaming through nectar-laden discs. In just a few weeks, Van Gogh completed 5 different sunflowers, each canvas a unique harmony of bright and muted yellows, a symphony of sunlight. He hung them side by his window, watching the early sun awaken their tones, and sighed with satisfaction. This was his most confident set of still lifes yet. But he did not stop there. Vincent purchased the yellow-painted building on Place Lamartine's corner, where he had first sketched Street Corner in Arles. Locals called it the Yellow House, Maison Jaune. On its 2 floors he rented 3 rooms, a main painting studio, a temporary exhibition space, and a cosy parlour for entertaining friends. The walls were painted a warm orange-tinged yellow, the same palette that defined his sunflowers and Montmartre lights, proclaiming both uniqueness and an unwavering belief in positive energy. In October, Van Gogh formally invited Paul Gauguin to live with him in the Yellow House. In an inspired letter, Vincent wrote, "Gauguin, let us create an artists' colony here on Place Lamartine, where Provence's light and our creativity will merge. I will paint still lifes, you work in watercolour, and who knows, a new style may be born." Gauguin, then wandering Brittany, accepted at once with a promising smile. Upon arrival, he brought his box of woodcut tools and a sketch of northern landscapes. The two embraced warmly, and seated together in the shared studio, placed the sunflowers opposite Market at Arles on the easel, sharing emotions and searching for common ground. From that morning on, Vincent concentrated on still lifes while Gauguin laboured at woodcarving. In the afternoons they ventured into town together, Vincent sketching stray orchid blooms by the canal, Gauguin photographing the Yellow House's sun-washed walls. At sunset, the Yellow House echoed with lively debates. Should light be rendered in warm or cool tones, bold outlines or delicate edges? How to blend Impressionism, Cloisonnism, and personal style into a cohesive vision. Amid shared living, Van Gogh began work on Bedroom in Arles, an intimate interior featuring a simple wooden bed, a small desk, and everyday objects. He painted the walls mint green and the wood floor a warm golden hue, evoking tranquility tinged with nostalgia. When his first study was complete, Vincent invited Gauguin to fill in the curtains and flower vase on the bedside table, adding perspective, detail and depth to the space. Despite the excitement, Vincent and Gauguin clashed over technique. Gauguin favoured flat, distilled forms. Van Gogh revelled in thick impasto and bold tonal shifts. On one evening their argument over dinner grew heated, each insisting on his own vision. Yet the next morning Provence's sunlight streamed through the Yellow House windows, and they set aside their differences to paint together. Temporary conflicts dissolved by colour and light. The inaugural chapter of their artists' colony at Arles culminated in a small exhibition in the Yellow House. The sunflowers faced bedroom in Arles, with street corner in Arles, opposite train station at Arles, under the window. Guests included brother Theo, Gauguin, several fellow painters, and Madame Jeanne. Laughter, candlelight, and the aroma of red wine blended into a joyous ode to creativity and artistic friendship. That night, Vincent lay sprawled on the simple wooden bed, staring up at the orange-yellow ceiling, his heart brimming with conviction. Arles had become his second home, a place where he found allies and spiritual support. And from here, the next vivid chapters of his life, yet to be painted, awaited. Summer in Arles turned the streets to blazing heat, but for Vincent Willem Van Gogh, it was the perfect moment to explore nocturnal light. After Bedroom in Arles and his series of sunflowers had given the Yellow House its character, he embarked on enchanted night scenes. One evening in mid-July, when the terracotta roofs still glowed from the day's sun, Vincent set up his easel in Place du Forum before the brightly lit café, La Terrasse. He perched his wooden stool on the steps, sketched quick outlines of tables and chairs and a waiter's hand, then dotted tiny gold spots like stars sparkling against a deep blue sky. Titled Café Terrace at Night, the painting not only captured a familiar street corner, but also conveyed the warm buzz of a Provençal evening. Next, he moved down to the Rhône riverbank. Beneath a slender crescent moon, gas lamps along the quay sent rippling reflections across the water. Vincent sketched a starry night over the Rhône, with bold dabs of cool slate blue and contrasting orange-yellow highlights, then leaned back to admire his work. Each glance seemed to bring the river's gentle lapping and the thrill of standing under the vast night sky. Back at the Yellow House, Vincent carefully translated these nocturnal moods onto canvas. Large star dots, the long streak of light on the stone quay, and the shadowy silhouette of a staircase. Arles's slow-paced yet profound nightlife became an endless source of inspiration. Amid this creative flow, tensions with Gauguin reached a peak. Gauguin, uninterested in night scenes, often retreated to his woodcut corner. One night as Vincent put final touches in Starry Night over the Rhône, they erupted in an argument. Should art express inner emotion or record reality? Palette knives clacked, voices rose, and by dawn Gauguin silently packed up his work and urged Vincent to clear space, cutting off discussion. Not wanting the rift to fester, Vincent penned a heartfelt invitation. Please come back. Arles's nightlights truly sparkle only when shared. Gauguin's terse reply read, I need my own space. The empty chair in the Yellow House loomed as a reminder of unwanted loneliness that one must sometimes accept. To soothe the solitude, Vincent returned to the ripening wheat fields. Thousands of golden stalks bowed in the country breeze. He swiftly sketched summer wheat field, with thick swaths of yellow and a clear blue sky dotted with white clouds. In this work, he rediscovered energy and connection to nature, bridging the emptiness left by Gauguin's departure. At the same time, Theo's letter arrived from Paris announcing an upcoming group show and urging Vincent to submit his night series, Café Terrace at Night, and Starry Night over the Rhône. Thinking of sharing these works with friends across Europe, Vincent realised he was painting not just for Arles, but to tell the universal story of light and shadow. So, deep into the Provençal night, Vincent continued seeking the rhythm of colour in lamplight and starlight, preparing for the next chapter of his journey, where loneliness and creative longing would intertwine into timeless masterpieces. After his relationship with Gauguin finally fractured, the Yellow House grew even quieter beneath Provence's blazing sun. Each morning, Vincent Willem Van Gogh awoke with an emptiness in his chest, but also with a fiercer creative hunger than ever before. From the front steps, he gazed at the radiant sunflowers on the wall and whispered to himself, I will not let loneliness defeat me. One late August afternoon, Vincent followed a country lane to Les Aliscans, the shaded Roman necropolis where cypress branches draped over crumbling stone gateways. Cracked arches cast long, slanted shadows, and yellow leaves drifted down like quiet applause. In that mournful stillness, he sketched entrance to Les Aliscans in rich sienna and moss green, using thick palette knife strokes to convey the ancient stone's enduring strength. He believed even death held a harmony with nature, and that his painting would reveal the viewer's own hidden emotions. The next morning, Vincent returned to the Arles market to buy deep cadmium orange, cool cerulean blue, and ivory white tubes of paint. In his studio, he arranged Café Terrace at night, Starry Night over the Rhône, an entrance to Les Aliscans side by side, 3 stages of nocturnal light, from the lively evening terrace to starlit water, then the solemn twilight of the graveyard. Together, they formed an emotional journey of illumination and shadow. By night, under a flickering oil lamp, Vincent experimented on a new series titled Olive Trees Under the Stars. He propped a canvas by the windowside olive tree and painted the trunk's sinuous curves, the leaves, and the inky sky dotted with starlight. His swirling brushstrokes seemed to echo the land's fierce life in darkness. When he finished, Vincent stepped back and felt, "This is more than a landscape. It is Arles's heartbeat." Exhaustion and intensity soon gave way to sleepless nights. In half-dreams, Starry Night over the Rhône and Olive Trees Under the Stars merged into a massive thirst for colour and form. He resurrected his half-finished night cafe, adding olive green outlines, then embarked on a fresh sketch titled Starry Night on the Saint-Rémy Hills, an imagined scene rooted in his memories of Arles. Realising his mental strain, Vincent wrote a letter to Theo, equal parts plea and prayer. "I fear I'm sinking into darkness, yet I crave light and colour with every fibre. Please come. Only you understand me fully." He enclosed several olive trees and Les Aliscans studies for Theo to review before departing. While waiting, Vincent turned inward and painted self-portraits. He captured his own pale complexion, the dark circles under his eyes, and his hair like flickering flame, an unspoken confession of his inner turmoil. His self-portrait in a green vest became a silent testimony. Loneliness, the hunger for understanding, and creative yearning all intertwined. In late September, when Theo's reply finally arrived, Vincent wept with relief. Theo promised to come at once and arranged for Vincent to rest at the peaceful asylum in Saint-Rémy de Provence to renew his strength. Before leaving the yellow house, Vincent placed his hand on the frame of sunflowers hanging by the door and whispered, "Thank you for staying with me always. I will return with an even stronger brushstroke." And so began a new chapter, the Saint-Rémy period, awaiting Vincent's next experiences and brilliant masterpieces. October 1889, beneath the olive trees bathed in the sunset glow of Saint-Rémy de Provence, Vincent Willem Van Gogh arrived at the gates of the Saint-Paul de Mausolée Hospital, a former monastery converted into a psychiatric asylum. The white stone walls still carried the faint scent of incense and fresh bougainvillea, and the iron gate, mottled with rust, seemed to hold echoes of centuries past. As the attendant led him along the softly curving tiled corridor, Vincent felt the cool breath of the inner garden, where rose bushes, cypress trees, and hydrangeas mingled under a cloudless sky. Vincent's lodging was small, a cramped attic room with a low sloping ceiling and a narrow window overlooking the rear garden. In the centre stood his well-worn easel beside a basket of paints. A few pinned sketches of olive trees and Les Aliscans were tacked to the wall. His brother Theo visited soon after, presenting him with fresh tubes of oil paint, colours specially formulated for the intense Provençal sun, and gently reminded him, "Paint whenever you wish. This place is peaceful and safe, so you can rebuild your strength and indulge your passion." On his first day at Saint-Rémy, Vincent strolled through the monastery grounds. Tall cypress trees cast dappled shadows on the mossy paths, and between them stretched beds of lavender in soft purple haze. He pulled out his sketchbook and pastels and quickly captured the monastery under cypress in deep indigo and violet, conveying a space both solemn and dreamlike. To Vincent, the trees were not only silent plants but witnesses to the stirrings of his own soul. That afternoon, after a meeting with Dr. Peyron and the head nun, Vincent was granted permission to paint in the patient garden. Winding paths led to a small pond where ducks drifted gently. He settled by a low tree and painted St. Paul Garden Pond, mixing slate blue with muted brown to render the reflective water in its tranquil mood. The doctor peered through a doorway and nodded with approval. "Your use of light and perspective is very original. Continue to evoke emotion through colour." Venturing further, Vincent followed a side gate to the marshy reed fields bordering the monastery wall. The stone wall glowed wheat yellow in the late sun, set against a silver sea of reeds. He sketched monastery wall and reeds with thick knife-applied layers of white, grey and golden ochre, creating a haunting rhythm like whispers from the past. Inside the asylum, patients wandered slowly in white robes, their faces marked by sorrow, yet touched by a strange serenity. Vincent observed their bowed postures and downcast gazes, then sketched Portrait of a Patient in earthen browns and pale violets. Under his brush, they became more than subjects. They embodied loneliness and the yearning for connection. When evening fell and the lamp flickered, Vincent turned to the cell-like window bars that symbolised confinement. He titled this canvas "Iron Bars and Stars," dotting tiny blue and yellow stars against their dark silhouette. In that moment, the painting became a testament to the desire for freedom and the hope of transcending one's limits. In the following weeks, Vincent devoted himself to still lifes, lavender in a vase, ripe olives, and deep ochre turmeric roots. Under the gentle light of the monastery refectory, he mixed vivid cadmium orange, verdant green, and soft purple to create rich gradients of bright to shadowed tones for these humble objects. The resulting series of monastery still lifes carried a poignant melancholy, yet overflowed with hope, mirroring the artist's own journey towards balance between light and darkness. And as autumn's crisp breeze began to stir, Vincent titled his new body of work, Light and Darkness at Saint-Rémy. From the monastery walls and reed fields to his self-portrait in the small convex mirror, each painting bore the breath of serenity, tinged with nostalgia and longing. Within that vibrant little room, Vincent understood that even in the prison of the mind, colour could open doors to freedom and healing. In early winter, 1889, when mist shrouded the Saint-Paul-de-Mausole gardens, Vincent Willem Van Gogh discovered that his surroundings seemed more enchanted than ever. Each dawn, the old wooden door creaked open just enough to let in pale light filtering through the thin fog, illuminating the emerald moss on the stone walls. Vincent seized these moments to sketch morning mist at the asylum, using ashen blues blended with grey-white, then dotted emerald highlights where the dew clung to branch tips, an attempt to preserve that fragile half-dream moment. One afternoon, Dr. Peyron invited Vincent to observe the communal art therapy room, where patients painted or wove for relaxation. Rather than hesitate, Vincent brought paper and pastels and asked to capture the scene. He sketched patient painting in bold, playful strokes of pink, yellow and green against a tranquil backdrop. The patient watched in silence, eyes brightening upon seeing Vincent's interpretation, and he felt an unspoken comfort ripple through the room. At nightfall, the monastery grew utterly silent. Once more, Vincent turned to the sky through his narrow window. In a whirlwind of homesickness, he painted Starry night over the asylum, sweeping white-yellow stars into the deep indigo-black sky in swirling patterns like cosmic vortices. The canvas voiced his inner resonance, solitude and the yearning for freedom intertwined, stirring any viewer's heart. In mid-November, a package of group show results arrived from Paris, including Vincent's recent still lifes accompanied by Theo's annotations. He was overjoyed to learn that L'Impressionist would feature his Light and Darkness at Saint-Rémy series, praising how he wove emotion into nature. Bolstered by this news, Vincent immediately began a new sketch, Ancient Olive Tree, where morning sparrows perched and chattered. He painted the dew-drenched leaves in pale green against brown earth, evoking both dignity and vitality. Not content with the asylum grounds, Vincent obtained permission to explore the nearby pine forest. He ventured along a deserted path to a centuries-old, mossy-barked pine. Bathed in slanting afternoon light, he sketched pine forest and cloudy sky, blending midnight blues, smoky greys, and a touch of ochre to capture sunbeams filtering through the needles. Each brushstroke seemed to carry the weight of centuries and the fragility of the present moment. As the chill of winter settled in, Vincent returned to his attic room, placed pine forest beside starry night over the asylum, and closed his eyes, listening, as if he could hear leaves falling and wind singing. The trembling foliage on his canvases reminded him that even when body and spirit feel spent, colour retains the power to heal and connect. Winter at Saint-Rémy deepened, and Provence donned its rare cloak of frost. Vincent immersed himself in year-end work, a series of winter still lifes featuring turnips, potatoes and dried sunflowers. He employed a more subdued palette, browns, greys, whites, and painted with bold yet dignified strokes. Those paintings conveyed the transition between outer decay and the smouldering life within. Even when his eyes ached from long nights, Vincent continued mixing pigments and sketching. In the snowy expanse of a Provençal winter, the young artist knew that his quest for light through paint would never cease, and that each new painting would stand as his firmest affirmation of the will to live. As winter in Saint-Rémy gave way to gentle spring, the monastery garden too awoke, its fresh green shoots mingling with last year's dry leaves on the earth. Vincent Willem Van Gogh continued to explore themes of changing colour and movement, from cypress and olive trees to the swaying reeds. One early morning, he followed a path to the southeast garden of the asylum, where birch trunks bore the scars of cold winds. In the pale, shifting light of dawn, Vincent sketched spring birches, using slender palette knife strokes of lemon yellow and young green to replace the ashen greys, portraying nature's fierce rebirth. Back in his studio, he turned his attention to completing Full Starry Night, a new version of Starry Night over the Rhone, that now foregrounded the monastery itself. On the canvas, deep blue spirals wound around the tower top and then radiated outward like waves of light. The asylum buildings glowed under the soft luminescence. Thick impasto intensified the scene's vitality and emotional power, transforming the night sky into a jubilant chorus after storms endured. In mid-February, the cherry blossoms in the courtyard inspired Vincent's new still life series, Monastery Flowers. He arranged 3 small earthenware vases, one holding cherry branches, one violets, one olive sprigs, and studied how morning light shifted each petal's hue, rendering them in pastel pinks, pale violets and fresh greens. Each arrangement became a silent melody, weaving fragility with endurance. Not content to paint only nature, Vincent also tackled inner portraits. On a cold evening, he invited the head nun to pose by candlelight in a corner of the room. In the soft yellow glow, her face emerged in delicate brushwork, her eyes conveying unspoken compassion. His portrait of the prioress testified to his ability to capture another's spirit, reflecting not just form, but the depths of feeling beneath. Between painting sessions, Vincent often sat on the monastery porch, gazing at the warming sky and weighing his future plans. Theo had written that the next phase of his journey would take him to Auvers-sur-Oise, near Paris, where the celebrated Dr. Gachet was hosting many artists. Friends likewise urged him to seek new surroundings to reignite his creativity. Before departing, Vincent decided to complete his light and darkness at Saint-Rémy sequence with one final work, Star-Reflected Lake. Evoking elements of his starry night, it portrayed a broad expanse of water, mirroring a distant sail silhouette and a lone lamp's glow. When he finished Star-Reflected Lake, Vincent stepped back and surveyed the entire series arrayed on the studio wall, from morning mist at the asylum to St. Paul Garden Pond, from pine forest to star-reflected lake. Each painting marked an inner journey, tracing the rhythms of light and darkness. In that quiet moment, the painter knew it was time to set out once more. Auvers waited, where the final chapter of Vincent Willem Van Gogh's extraordinary journey would shine with his last masterpieces. In May 1890, just as spring's first blossoms appeared in Auvers-sur-Oise, Vincent Willem Van Gogh left the Saint-Rémy asylum with his completed Light and Darkness series in tow. The train rolled into Auvers-sur-Oise station, and Vincent stepped out into a cool breeze scented with lavender from hedges along the tracks. Villagers waved through the wooden carriage windows, and in that first moment he sensed the town's gent yet lively rhythm. Theo had secured Vincent lodging at the Auberge-Ravou, a simple inn nestled among low brick houses and vineyards. His attic room was small, but its wide window looked out over verdant wheat fields. Flowering jasmine vines and mossed brick walls glowed golden in the late sun, inviting Vincent to set up his easel by the sill. Before Theo returned to Paris, the brothers embraced one last time and pledged to reunite at the upcoming exhibition. Soon after, Vincent visited Dr. Paul Gachet, recommended by Émile Bernard's father, Camille Pissarro, and other painters as a healer who understood an artist's soul. In Gachet's book-filled study, the physician welcomed him with a warm smile and open arms. He showed Vincent his own self-portrait, then gently placed a hand on Vincent's shoulder. "Mr. Van Gogh, this region will inspire you anew. Paint everything you feel, the fields, the church, and the Oise River itself." On quiet mornings, Vincent wandered the dirt roads around town. He sketched Auvers Church, its dark tile roof set against a vivid blue sky and drifting white clouds. In soft morning light, the church glowed amidst the fields. He thinned his oils for a gentle background wash, then applied thick strokes along the roofline to emphasise the building's ancient solidity. At midday, he tackled ripe wheat field, a familiar subject rendered with fresh technique. In a sea of gold, his vertical brushstrokes rippled like wind-blown waves, evoking the summer breeze's soft roar. Passers-by paused, astonished as the canvas seemed to smell of sun-dried straw. Vincent smiled, feeling deeply the urge to preserve the quiet beauty of rural life. In the afternoon, he returned to Gachet's garden studio, where hung the portrait of Dr. Gachet, the doctor's own self-study, eyes full of concern. Vincent brought pastels and added swift dabs to a copy of that work, striving to capture his friend's compassionate soul. Each mark felt like a tribute to the mentor who not only healed physical wounds, but also listened to an artist's heart. At sunset, Vincent placed his studies, Auvers Church, ripe wheat field, and portrait of Dr. Gachet, on the window ledge of his room. The warm glow of the lamp paired with the descending dusk outside to create a space both cosy and contemplative. He sat before the paintings watching their colours deepen, then jotted in his notebook. Northern France lacks Provence's blazing sun, but this small land is enough to set the soul ablaze. From that moment, the young painter entered the final stage of his journey, when Auvers Church and ripe wheat field would stand as his most enduring legacies, etching Vincent Willem Van Gogh's name indelibly into Western art history. The people of Auvers-sur-Oise still recall Vincent Willem Van Gogh's hurried footsteps every morning. Though his health remained fragile, the artist never ceased roaming the fields, his eyes alight with the desire to capture every final moment of summer. One early dawn, while mist still clung to the ripe wheat, Vincent followed a country lane to a distant field stretching to the horizon. He unpacked his sketchbook and paint tubes and made a rapid study titled "Wheat Field with Crows." Brilliant gold stalks contrasted with an ash-grey sky shot through with dark, shifting clouds, and a flock of ominous crows wheel-led in a black mass overhead, an image both violent and tragic. His palette knife strokes were urgent, thick where grief pressed, thin where hope flickered, a raw echo of his inner plea: live intensely, even in contradiction. After that wrenching morning session, Vincent returned to Auberge-Ravou, where the innkeepers were accustomed to his silent routine. Instead of his usual tea and biscuits, He poured himself a glass of pale piquette wine and studied the sketch quietly. In Paris, Theo wired anxiously about his health and offered to send more tonics. Vincent simply replied, "I'm fine. All I need is paint and sunshine." Far from done with wheat field with crows, Vincent pressed on with other stark themes. He sketched church under the stormy sky, slashing broad, inky clouds across the steeple to evoke an impending tempest, and Auvers cemetery, rows of tombstones casting long shadows on green grass, suggesting life's fragile fleetingness. Each study took only hours, yet often left fresh paint stains on the inn's walls, testaments to his inexhaustible drive. That afternoon, Dr. Gachet called in at the inn and sat by Vincent's window, examining the sketches on his easel. "Vincent, you've created powerful images, but don't forget to care for yourself. Art is precious, but health is essential." Vincent looked up and gave a wry smile. "I know, but this painting must be done now before the storm inside me passes." Dr. Gachet nodded in understanding and offered no more advice. When night fell, Vincent returned to a nearby field to draw station lights at night. The Auvers-sur-Oise train station's lamp glow in the summer darkness. He laid down a deep ultramarine background and dotted scattered yellow lights like lonely stars. The sketch recorded not just the scene, but his restless urge to move on, to seek truth in colour. That night Vincent came home utterly exhausted. At the auberge door, the innkeeper found him staggering and helped him inside. They wrapped him in blankets, but in his eyes lingered an unquiet thought. Before sleep took him, Vincent flipped through his sketchbook, reviewing the past 2 days' studies: wheat field with crows, church under the stormy sky, and station lights at night. He added a final note in the high corner of the page: "Each painting is a drop of my soul's blood." The next morning the artist did not awaken. The innkeeper summoned Dr. Gachet, and word spread swiftly through Auvers. Vincent Willem Van Gogh had passed away in the night, leaving behind a room filled with wet sketches and half-used tubes of paint. Villagers came quietly to pay their respects, gazing at the still fresh strokes as the last silent witnesses to the blazing journey of one of Western art's greatest painters. In the days following Vincent Willem Van Gogh's passing at the Auberge Ravou, Auvers-sur-Oise was shrouded in stillness and mourning. The innkeepers and villagers quietly cleared out his attic room, gathering the wet sketches on his easel and the tubes of paint scattered across his desk. Each morning, Dr. Paul Gachet arrived with Theo to complete the formalities. The clip-clop of horses faded on the country road, replaced by the soft sobs of those paying their respects. The funeral itself was simple. Vincent's coffin, made of plain wood, was draped in a yellow-toned cloth, a hue emblematic of his paintings, and carried to the village cemetery. Beneath the leaning cypress trees, Theo bent over his brother's grave and softly recited a favourite line of verse Vincent had once written in a letter: "I feel life is a grand painting, and I must paint every moment." As the mourners dispersed, a few of Vincent's sketches were pinned along the path: wheat field with crows, starry night over the Rhône, bedroom in Arles, a final farewell honouring his boundless love for light and colour. Back in Paris, Theo organised a memorial exhibition at the Galerie des Arts. Oil paintings and preparatory sketches were displayed side by side, each labelled with its date and location. Visitors lingered not only over the bold impasto, but also over Vincent's handwritten notes, brief verses, and hurried margin studies in his journals. The artist Émile Bernard remarked, "Van Gogh did more than paint the world, he shared his very soul with us." Time passed quickly, and Vincent's renown spread across Europe. Years later, the Light and Darkness collection opened in major museums, inspiring countless generations of painters. Fields of wheat, sunflower landscapes, and starry nights, through Vincent's hand, became immortal symbols of the fierce, luminous will to live. Now, looking back on Vincent Willem Van Gogh's oeuvre, we can better understand how the intensely emotional images he created forged an immortal legacy in Western art history. From remote Zundert to the blazing sunflower fields of Provence, Each painting, each sketch, is a sincere self-portrait that opens a window onto his vividly coloured inner world. Immediately after his death, Van Gogh's name did not instantly shine on the art map. Yet thanks to the tireless efforts of his brother Theo and their family, his works gradually won public and critical acclaim. The memorial exhibition in Paris in 1891, just 1 year after Vincent's passing, sparked a widespread wave of interest. Viewers were astonished by his thick impasto layers, radical handling of light, and unfettered expressiveness, a clear departure from the meticulous realism that had dominated the era. In the early decades of the 20th century, Expressionism flourished in Germany and France, drawing directly on Van Gogh's use of colour to convey emotion. German painter Emil Nolde once admitted, "Without Van Gogh, we could never have painted with such intense hues." In Norway, Edvard Munch found inspiration in Van Gogh's swirling lights and emotive strokes, which helped ignite a spirit of personalisation in his work. In France, post-impressionists, such as Henri Matisse and André Derain, carried on Van Gogh's legacy through Fauvism, employing vibrant, non-naturalistic colours to evoke psychological states. Matisse remarked, "Van Gogh taught me that yellow is not just yellow. It can be joy, it can be sorrow, it can be a dream." Thanks to this ethos, Fauvism achieved resounding success and spread across Europe. Van Gogh's influence extended beyond painting into literature and film. Irving Stone's 1934 novel Lust for Life brought Van Gogh's life to a wide readership, portraying the passionate, tragic artist. The 1956 film adaptation, starring Kirk Douglas, again made Van Gogh's story an emotional touchstone and an inspiration for new generations. In the United States, major museums like New York's Museum of Modern Art and Chicago's Art Institute have mounted Van Gogh retrospectives, helping Western audiences deepen their understanding of his techniques and personal narrative. Provence's sunflower fields have become a cultural and tourist emblem, drawing visitors to Arles and Auvers-sur-Oise to see the original landscapes. In the contemporary world, Van Gogh's style lives on in new forms: digital painting, animation, even street art. Brick walls along Montmartre's boulevards are now covered in swirling stars and sunflower motifs, reminding passers-by of the wandering painter who once roamed these streets. Virtual reality art installations recreate Starry Night as an immersive three-dimensional experience, allowing audiences to feel Van Gogh's heartbeat in space. But above all, Van Gogh's enduring value lies in his courage to feel deeply and express fully. He did not merely paint landscapes or paint portraits. He used his brush to capture every breath, every tremor of the soul. Every viewer who beholds his work can find a piece of themselves: loneliness, the longing for life, the belief in beauty, and a renewed appreciation for life's smallest moments. In the 1920s and 1930s, Vincent Willem Van Gogh's renown reached new heights as private collectors in Europe and North America sought out his rare masterpieces. One of the most memorable events was the 1928 Sotheby's auction in London of Starry Night, which fetched a record price at the time, stunning the public and igniting the first Van Gogh frenzy. Then in 1935, New York's Museum of Modern Art mounted a major Van Gogh retrospective, gathering nearly every work held in the United States, and cemented his reputation as one of the greatest painters of all time. Around the same period in Japan and across East Asia, the ukiyo-e tradition, woodblock prints that had inspired Van Gogh in 1887-1888, was re-examined alongside his Arles paintings. Japanese artists such as Naohisa Koide and Yoshida Hiroshi expressed deep admiration for how Van Gogh broke the rules of light and perspective, and their work helped spark the mid-century revival of the Shinhanger movement. Over subsequent decades, art historians have continued to uncover new insights into Van Gogh's life. The full publication in 1952 of the correspondence between Vincent and his brother Theo provided the world with an intimate portrait of his loneliness, his yearning for connection, and their unbreakable bond. These letters are valued not only as historical documents, but also for illuminating the emotional and human depth of the artist himself. In the realm of education, Van Gogh's work has become a cornerstone of art history and studio practice curricula in many universities. Instructors encourage students to read his paintings by imagining themselves in Van Gogh's place, using colour and brushwork to tell an inner story, and to integrate colour theory with personal experience. This pedagogical approach helped to foster a new generation of expressionist painters and to deepen the psychological dimensions of painting. Entering the 21st century, digital technologies have brought Van Gogh closer to audiences than ever before. Interactive exhibitions like Van Gogh Alive employ dynamic lighting and high-resolution projections to immerse visitors in living brushstrokes. Virtual reality museums recreate sunflower fields or the cloistered gardens of Saint-Rémy, placing viewers at the very heart of his inspiration. Beyond the visual arts, Van Gogh's legacy has also underscored the healing power of creativity. Contemporary art therapy practitioners frequently cite Van Gogh's life as testament to the idea that brush and pigment can do more than produce art. They can help people confront and transcend inner pain. Works such as Olive Trees Under the Stars and Self-Portrait in a Green Vest have become icons of the restorative potential of artistic expression. Even today, more than 130 years after his death, Van Gogh has never truly left us. Every time we encounter sunflowers in a museum or revisit Wheatfield with crows in a book, we can feel the pulse of his vivid, eternal, and deeply moving heart. That, above all, is the greatest proof of his legacy. Not the quantity of his output, but his power to awaken in us an enduring belief in life's immortal beauty. In recent years, as the golden light in Van Gogh's paintings has spread through major and minor museums alike, his life story continues to be told in many languages. In the Netherlands, the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam houses nearly 200 paintings and over 800 drawings, becoming a pilgrimage site for millions of visitors each year. There, guests can follow his footsteps through Bedroom in Arles, marvel at his sunflowers, and trace the final strokes on the sketch Wheatfield with Crows. In art house cinemas, the new documentary Immortal Light blends archival footage with animation to recreate scenes of Vincent at his easel, his spontaneous brush plunges, his urgent colour mixes under the Provençal sun. A warm piano score, interwoven with Chopin, hints at Van Gogh's love of music and the fusion of artistic forms. International critics are constantly hunting for the new Van Gogh, artists bold enough to use daring colours and expose raw emotion. In Vietnam, art students from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City still practice impasto techniques and swirling strokes inspired by Starry Night. They learn to wield the brush as Van Gogh wielded his palette knife, so that pigment does not merely sit on the canvas, but springs alive. Community projects like Starry Gate murals around the world invite people to chalk their streets in Van Gogh's style, turning alleyways in Lisbon, Buenos Aires and Tokyo into vibrant, swirling tributes. Teachers encourage children to skip colouring books and instead try brushing Olive Trees Under the Stars sketches onto large sheets, feeling the rhythm of a Provençal night. On social media, the hashtag #VanGoghLives has drawn millions of posts, selfies beside Starry Night reproductions, time-lapse iPad sketches that mimic impasto, and deep learning restorations that finish flowers Vincent never quite painted. Yet through every new technology, the core spirit remains. Feel colour as you feel life. Academically, interdisciplinary studies abound. Creative psychology courses dissect Self-Portrait in a Green Vest to probe links between warm, cool colour contrasts and emotional states. Neuroscientists scan viewers' brains via fMRI as they watch Starry Night over the Rhône, noting heightened activity in regions associated with perceiving swirling light. Biological proof of painting's emotional power. Among collectors, Van Gogh's handful of black and white sketches, drawn everywhere he went, now fetch record prices at Christie's London. a testament to reverence for his raw yet heartfelt strokes. National Archives preserved the letter Vincent wrote Theo after finishing Wheat Field with Crows, in which he penned, "Yellow is the language of my heart. In each golden ear of grain I see both life and the end of all things." Today, more than 170 years after his birth, his story still inspires anyone longing for creative direction, any wounded heart seeking refuge, and anyone who believes art can steady the soul amid life's storms. For the 175th anniversary of Van Gogh's birth in 2028, the Van Gogh Museum and UNESCO will co-host global events, from open-air painting workshops in Arles to street art markets in Zundert, affirming once again that Vincent Willem Van Gogh's legacy is not only in pictures on walls, but in the undying flame he kindled in humanity's heart.